Hello and welcome once again to episode 32 of Code Completion. We're a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name once again is Dimitri Bugnol, and I'll be your host for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Spencer.
Hey.
And we have a special guest completionist today, Lynn.
Hello.
So Lynn, you've been in development for a few years. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why DubDub pertains to you?
Hi, once again, I'm Lynn. I'm a junior developer. I started in 2019, so that was the first DubDub that I went to. And yeah.
And you have some apps on the App Store, correct?
Yeah, I have two apps on the App Store. One is called Hungry, the other one's called Not Pho. Yeah.
So
exciting stuff.
You'll recognize those as frequent sponsors to our lovely show. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So as usual, before we get into our main topic, it's time for our indie app spotlight. So first up is Film Log by Simon Braun, a straightforward movie diary that helps you keep track of what you watched, any notes you've taken, and what you're looking forward to. Film Log makes it easy to search for movies to add and even allows you to customize which movie posts are shown to customize your experience. You can support Simon by downloading Film Log completely free and checking out the $3.99 in-app upgrade for all its pro features. Next, we have The Archive by Christian Tates, a Mac app dedicated to making it easy to take notes. The Archive supports Markdown as a lightweight way of stylizing your text so you can concentrate on taking notes in its clean and simple user interface. The Archive costs $19.99 but comes with a 60-day free trial, so please give it a try to show your support towards Christian. And finally, we have Sensei by Oscar Groth, a fully featured hardware and software monitor for your Mac. So Sensei can not only give you live information on how your Mac is performing, but also help you optimize and clean up your Mac so it runs even better. Sensei can even help you uninstall pesky applications that litter their bits all over the place. So Sensei either costs $29 per year or $59 as a one-time purchase with guaranteed access to all future updates, so be sure to give it a try to support Oscar. And if you are an indie developer, we want to hear from you. Please reach out to us on Twitter at CodeCompletion via DM so we can spotlight your app in this section as well. So this leads straight into our main topic for today. And as we record, it is DubDub week, so DubDub 2021. And we are recording right after, or the day after, the keynote and the State of the Union. So there's a ton of new stuff to talk about. So Spencer, what is the leading topic that you are most interested in this year?
Oh, I'm not sure about the leading, like the most interesting thing. But I spent a couple hours today just watching a few sessions, and there have been some really interesting things where, to me, it felt like the keynote was almost more like customer facing, very much surface level information, right? Even less new APIs were shown or anything. It felt very almost just like another Apple event to me. State of the Union was a little better, but it was, still somewhat like that. However, today, as I've been looking through these sessions, obviously they're great and they do really well. Couple of them, I'm just going to kind of list them off and we can kind of talk about whatever sounds the most interesting are.
Sounds good.
I think a big one is, of course, async await. And I dove into one of the sessions that was, I can't remember exactly what it was called. It was 30 minutes, and it was a really good introduction into how to make it work with like completely on its own, how to make it work with completion closures, and it was really cool. It seemed very much like you could adopt it at your own pace, which I liked, where you don't have to necessarily convert everything over from GCD over to async await. It's kind of, they're still interoperable, which I thought was cool. Something with that was just the amount of code. One example that they had was, more or less like a 20-line network call to grab an image, I think it was. And it ended up boiling it down to something more like 5 or 6 lines, if I remember right. So that was cool. And also, they're integrating async await into testing, which I thought was awesome because I remember learning expectations and also trying to teach expectations, and that was a hard thing for people to get their minds wrapped around. So it was really cool to also see that integrated into testing as well.
Yeah, expectations I expect to be a thing of the past.
Yeah.
Now that the test itself knows that stuff is coming and doesn't need to necessarily stop waiting for it. And that's really what async await does for you, is it writes your closure on your behalf, so that way you can concentrate on making something that looks linear, but it's still going to be a nested closures with the amount of awaits that you have. The code you're not gaining any new functionality with this. You're just getting more readable and easier to understand code.
Mm-hmm. One thing I did enjoy that they were talking about was, and now I already forgot the terminology. I think it was suspending, where the system is able to make use of any thread that you have some asynchronous work going on if it's not as important and it needs to perform some UI update. It's not completely blocking the thread, but it's kind of letting you pass over control from yourself to the system and vice versa at your own leisure. And I'm hopeful about the performance implications of that as well.
Yeah, so just using async await, it doesn't really involve threading at all. As we said, it's just the closures, but there are some new APIs that kind of replace GCD for the most part under the hood, and those ones work just like GCD in that if you do have a lot of work that needs to be done, it will make as many threads as it needs, rather than as many threads as you specify. So it really takes care of that burden away from you, the developer, so you don't really have to think about it too much.
A couple of the other ones that I thought were interesting, a little bit smaller, but I was watching What's New in AppKit as well, and there was the at invalidating property wrapper, which is cool for being able to invalidate things based on like layout, constraints. There were 4 or 5 different ways of and drawing. Anyway, really cool. I was hoping that would be something that would be available in UIKit as well, but it doesn't seem like it. I watched the What's New in UIKit.
I think it is available in UIKit, and if it isn't, it's stupidly easy to implement as well.
Oh, good.
The method, it works the same way as you would have done it manually. So just saying set needs display or set needs layout is essentially all it's doing. It's just making it a nice,
just less
syntactic
boilerplate.
Sugar. And less boilerplate for the most part.
What does it mean to invalidate layout?
So basically, anytime the layout needs to change, you tell the system, we no longer need this. We want the layout to change, and it's going to do it when it's convenient for the system to do it. So if 5 things say one after the other, we need the layout to change, we need the layout to change, we need the layout to change. It's not going to tell the layout to change 5 times. It's just going to keep accumulating the fact that it needs to change, and then when it's ready to, it will change the layout.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Kind of.
It's kind of similar to like a state variable in SwiftUI, where when you change the state of a state variable, then it reruns all of the view code, and it's like, oh, now this button needs to be selected or something like that. It's just a way of saying there needs to be some kind of update.
Mm-hmm. And it's a way of like passing the work on to later, so that way you can very efficiently mark a bunch of things as being changed, and then when it's ready to, it will go ahead and draw, or we'll go ahead and lay out.
Okay.
Small things like just UI changes, button styles, even tint colors to everywhere, tint colors to or accent colors, I think they call them, to things like segmented controls and all that are cool. And I was just thinking,
buttons on iOS finally get borders after 15 years.
Not only that, but they have the gray background. They have the fully opaque backgrounds. And I was just thinking, like, how funny is it, like, how stoked and excited we can be for, like, new buttons. And that's just, like, a weird thing. But I was like, yes, I love this. New buttons. Awesome.
Don't have to build these from scratch.
Exactly. I mean, like, you could do it, but just more work for you. And then a couple other things were, like, image resizing, that's something that I've done in a couple of my apps, and it just has a built-in function to do image resizing to turn things into thumbnails. And I thought, it's a very simple thing, but something that I'm honestly looking forward to, because the way that I'm doing it is probably not great. So being able to just say, like, I want this thumbnail to be this CG size, awesome. So I think kind of some good quality of life improvements. We didn't see changes to everything, and we didn't see tons of new introductions, but I think overall, some really cool new language and API features are going to be coming here in the fall.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think after a decade plus of going to WWDC, that this is probably the lightest WWDC in terms of API changes. There's really not a lot to be overwhelmed by in terms of what's new. And I think that's a great thing, because it means that instead of concentrating on adding, Apple instead took the time to polish and make things work better. And like those ease of life changes that you mentioned, like having a method to just generate a thumbnail. It's always been easy to generate a thumbnail, or it's always been easy to make a custom button, but now you don't have to even do that. And I think that was always the mentality that made Cocoa a much better application framework than most other application frameworks of the time, is that it came with a toolbox of stuff that was ready to go. And all you needed to do was customize it for your use case of the app that you're building. You didn't need to kind of go under the hood of the framework and really start tinkering with a bunch of stuff. And it's good to see Apple going back to that and making a lot of things just easier to use, especially areas that have been heavily used. So I think that's a great direction that Apple went in this year. And I'm almost happy that the keynote didn't really have a ton of stuff for developers. Like, there wasn't a lot that we need to adapt to make a lot of functionality work, like the universal control, where you can move your mouse from one computer to an iPad to a different computer across the desk. Like, you don't need to do anything in your application for that to work, but you benefit by being a part of an ecosystem that someone might have. If you're just an iPad app, someone working on a Mac can now suddenly start using your app that's open right next to them. And if you support drag and drop, then all of that is well integrated. And I think that's a great direction.
Yeah, like you said, it really is maybe a good thing. And at work, we finished the keynote. I went up to the office. Everyone's vaccinated and stuff, and we were safe and everything. We watched the keynote, and we watched the State of the Union in the afternoon. And by the end of both of them, we kind of remarked exactly what you said, where we don't really have to do much by way of changes to our app, which is awesome, because generally, you could have some breaking changes, or you need to implement something. It's been deprecated, now it's been completely phased out or something. It's pretty light on that front. So everything that I've kind of talked about are probably more things that I'll be using in the more immediate future for myself rather than at work. And that's kind of nice to like do it at your own pace, where in 2019, when SwiftUI came out, Combine also came out, and there were a bunch of things, and everyone gets that anxiety, I guess, of feeling like you have to learn everything. And there's always, those tweets from everyone like, everyone chill out, it's all good, we don't need to, burden ourselves with learning these brand new frameworks the day that they come out or something. So kind of having that light amount of developer information is nice, like you say.
That said, it's been like since 2019 when SwiftUI just came out, it's been 3 years. And SwiftUI finally grew up, I feel like, this year. Like, there's a lot of new stuff there. And it really is kind of fleshing itself out in terms of being a fully featured UI framework to build out your UI. Lynn, was there anything that you saw that you think might be useful in your apps that came in SwiftUI this year?
I was worried you're gonna ask me because I can't remember what we watched earlier. I think kind of like Spencer just mentioned, I'm a bit overwhelmed. Kind of like, since I'm just starting out. And yeah, I'm a bit overwhelmed considering like there's so many things to keep up with and everyone's constantly like on Twitter posting new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
everything I watch, I kind of seem like just blank out afterwards. So I can't tell you anything, but there's definitely some cool stuff. I just remember that.
No, and that's maybe the best part is often what I'll do is I'll just make notes about whatever I'm watching, and then I mean you could install the Xcode beta and start playing around with it, but they're not even going to really be something that you at the very most might want to implement until the fall when Xcode 13 is out and you can actually submit apps using all of these new APIs and stuff. So there's plenty of time to learn it, and even brand new stuff you don't have to touch. They mention new stuff with Reality Kit, and there's new Swift UI things and everything. You can take it at your own pace. Like, I haven't really touched much of Combine at all. Is that a bad thing? Probably. But it's not like I've needed it in my day-to-day job, or else I would have learned it by now. So I definitely understand the feeling, but don't feel that way if possible, or at least to a minimal degree.
That said, on the topic of Combine, I feel like it may have been ill-timed when it did come out, because Combine is all about chaining different modifiers after one another, much like SwiftUI is for views. But a lot of these chains process data in different ways via publishers to sources and cancelable and all that. And that word jumble may indicate that I, too, have never used Combine, but as of this year, it seems like you may never really need to really dive head straight into Combine, because async await is a language level feature that really makes a lot of what Combine offered available to everything else. So for instance, on the topic of like URL sessions, you no longer have to have clunky completion handlers to take care of the data that's coming back from a network request. You can just go ahead and chain that with a bunch of other methods, and as long as they're all asynchronous, you can go ahead and have a very clear pathway from point A to point B, and that kind of negates a lot of the need for Combine. Now, there are certain things that Combine offers that can probably play into this, but it makes it a lot less of like a singular thing that you need to learn, and much more a bunch of building blocks that you can interchange with a whole bunch of other things. I think that is, I think that's a good thing, to be honest, because it was a whole bunch of complexity that was added at once, and it doesn't seem to have changed at all the past 2 years, which was surprising, honestly.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned that, that was kind of going to be my next question was there anything that you were surprised that didn't get kind of more attention or any attention at all? I think for me, one has been Combine, and maybe a little bit of SwiftUI. They did implement some new things, but they didn't say like, this is SwiftUI 3 and we've introduced a bunch of things. They did add a ton of cool things like multi-column tables and everything, but
they flushed it out. I guess all the missing bits.
I guess it was still less than I was expecting. Is there anything like that for you too that you thought maybe would have been hit harder?
Anything you were looking forward to?
I'm just here to learn, guys. Don't put me on the spot. I'm just kidding.
Well, I guess you did say that you didn't want there to be a whole bunch of new stuff that is introduced that then would overwhelm you, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it's good that Apple did not have a bunch of new stuff, and it's just a small iteration on what was already there.
Yeah. I just remember there was a little thing that they added. It's probably not that big of a deal, but it was something that... so in my app, Not Pho, there's a part where in some of the description we use Vietnamese terminology, and to show a difference between that versus like the rest that is in English, we wanted to do like a different font or a different like formatting type, that kind of idea. Before it wasn't possible to do that. So Dimitri kind of had to help me with like parsing out the strings that we had to then like, hey, do a check if the terminology has these pound keys in front of it, then if that's the case, then like change the formatting of that. So they just added something called a markdown where you can just, I forgot what was the keys that they'd use, but essentially you can just specify that in your string without needing to do any specific check. So that was one thing I just remembered.
Yeah, having Markdown just at the tips of your fingertips, Markdown
cool.
parsing, I think is going to be huge for a lot of apps. So you might be familiar with this if you've ever used like Slack or any number of message apps like Discord as well has this. Anytime you put stuff around underscores, it becomes italic. If you put stars, it becomes bold. You can make links like this. You can put code segments like this. You can strike through text like this. All of that is now taken care of by the frameworks. And this works not just in Swift and Swift UI, but also with Objective-C and Foundation. So I think it's really cool that this has been added, and it will delete a lot of code for a ton of people once they can require iOS 15 and macOS 12.
Yeah, I'm super excited for Markdown support. Markdown is life-changing to me coming from, Pages or Microsoft Word in high school and stuff, and for formatting. Markdown just makes everything so much simpler. So having it kind of as a first-class citizen is really exciting.
I'm kind of hoping that Slack for iOS uses this because their current Markdown live processor is a hot steaming pile of dumpster fire. And like, for example, if you start using Markdown, it will like change the font on you, but then it doesn't change it back when you're done using the Markdown. It's not good.
Yep.
So I hope that Slack kind of makes use of these new technologies and over their own, because their own is lacking. Even though like it works fine on the Mac, I don't get it. Any case, so I really think that a lot of these, like, they're quality of life improvements. And Xcode has a ton of quality of life improvements as well. There was a thread by Paul Hudson, I think, that you showed me last night, where he was going and just typing some code and showing some of the changes. One of which was if you type a symbol that is part of a framework that your project knows about, but you didn't import that framework, it's going to insert that import statement for you. If you type if let and then a variable name, it will automatically suggest variable name equals variable name, which is a super common pattern when you're unwrapping
cool.
optionals. If you type switch colors, and colors is an enum, and you hit return, it will automatically fill out that switch with all the cases for you. Were there any others that I'm missing?
I think there was one where if you do a loop through an array.
Oh yeah, if
you
the
type names matches in a way.
Yeah, so if you have an array called names, right, and you say for name,
and then it'll just fill out the rest
in
of
names,
it for you.
It'll figure out the singular and the plural. So I think a lot of that is going to make typing code a lot easier, because a lot of that code in Swift is really inverted, where the thing that you have comes after what you're typing, and therefore autocomplete up until now was not super useful. You just had to hunt for that property name again and then like copy paste it to get it where you wanted. So I think a lot of those improvements are going to be very, very useful going forward. And another one from Xcode is documentation support has been completely overhauled. So you've all heard us, you, our listeners, have all heard us complain at length about how you should do documentation-driven development. And Apple actually used that terminology when they were introducing their new Doc-C documentation compiler, which will build up documentation just like the documentation that's in Xcode, but for your app or for your library that you're writing, which makes all those documentation comments that you've been slowly putting in your project, right? That you've been slowly adding.
Right.
Like, you've been doing that, right? Well, if you have been doing that, the next time you compile your project in Xcode 13, you will get fully fledged documentation that you can even export as a web page. And they're saying they're going to open source all this. So I'm really looking forward to that.
That's really cool. I'm excited for that. one other thing that you we were talking about in our Quill chat, join our Quill channel group thing. I don't
Join
know
the
what
club.
you call that. Join the club. The Code Completion
Codecompletion.io
Club.
/ join the club.
There we go. We were talking. There was quite a bit of talk about all of the collaboration tools. Now we've got pull requests and everything in Xcode directly, and generally I'll just use the terminal for commits and everything, but it is nice at times just to even have what we have now, which is, basic commit, pull, push support. So even more of that integration where, like they were talking about, just staying in one application is going to be really nice. So I hope that it works with more than just GitHub, because at work we use Bitbucket. I don't know if they said anything about that or not, but
Xcode does have support for Bitbucket directly.
Right.
So I imagine it would work. Otherwise, maybe this is a good opportunity to jump ship from Bitbucket and go to GitHub. I mean, it's where the tool support is, right?
I mean, I use GitHub for my own personal stuff, but at work, I don't have the ability to do that. Let's see. There was one other thing with that. I can't remember, though.
One thing with the pull request I think is immensely cool is it allows you to do a bit more during your review. So traditionally, to review a pull request, you need to go to the website. You see a lightly code highlighted version of the code. You have no clue if it compiles or not. You have to do extra work to verify any of that. One excellent thing about this being all integrated in Xcode is you can go ahead and jump to that pull request without kind of disturbing the work that you're doing. You can go ahead and edit it and add comments right there in Xcode, and you can build and run and place breakpoints and see if it works without doing much more work. And I haven't tried it to see how well this works, but if it's done well, I think that's going to really change how much people give thoughtful reviews to code. And that's one of the best ways of improving code quality, honestly, is just to make sure a second person sees it and comments on it and make sure it works. So anything to improve that whole process, I think I'm entirely in favor for.
Yeah. At work, someone else has to approve the code before it gets merged. But like you said, it's just on a website and I'll look through the code before I approve it. But a lot of times I'm not going to test it. It's generally something that is either something way above my pay grade, I just don't know how it works, or it's just not something I'm familiar with, even if it's something that someone else is doing sort of more at the level that I would be able to understand. So being able to pull it in and run it and debug it if I have to in a much easier fashion without me having to jump into the terminal or tower and check it out myself. Just streamlining that process is going to be really nice, and I agree that will hopefully help code quality in general.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like we're all kind of waiting in anticipation to see how well the new Xcode Cloud works. So
yeah,
apparently this has been in the works for years, ever since Apple bought Buddy Build. So I guess we'll see how well that works going forward. But I think the nicest thing about it, and probably the thing that's going to get most people to switch over to it, is the fact that you no longer need to manage your keys and your certificates.
Yeah.
It's all just taken care of by Apple. Who'd have thunk that would be possible? And then you don't need to care about it anymore. And I think that's going to be a huge quality of life improvement.
I think, I'm interested to see how they do the pricing model, because that's not coming out until fall. But, we've got someone on our team working on, I can't exactly remember what we're doing right now, but they were looking into using Jenkins and all that for CI/CD. So being able to have something first party and, like you said, managing keys and all that is going to be amazing. Having the Xcode integration of seeing how the builds go, where it failed and everything is going to be really nice. So I'd imagine that quite a few companies, I guess I should say, will jump on that. And I'm wondering, is it going to be at sort of a tiered level where it's like somewhat like is it GitHub Actions that you have a limited amount of time?
Yeah, 2,000 minutes for most
Right.
accounts.
Right. So maybe there's a free tier, and then up to a certain point, maybe, your average, like for not FA or anything, probably doesn't need much build time. But for longer,
You'd think.
well, I guess it's SwiftUI, so maybe. But compared to, sort of more of a larger app, like one that we work on, probably needs a lot more time, and, they might tier it, or I don't know. What do you think?
I hope they do go and use a strategy like that, because I don't look forward to having a multi-$1,000 bill from Apple just to kind of submit apps to the App Store, unless it's providing me significant benefit. And we can get into another time how well Apple took care of the situation in terms of developer relations. I don't think they did a great job, but
No.
again, that can be for another time. So it's probably in Apple's interest to make sure that this is done in a tasteful way. I think what they did with iCloud and CloudKit is probably a good inspiration in terms of give away a ton of resources, but make those resources very obviously capped, so that way what you're actually going to be using, and not to kind of overdo it, and then you can talk to them if you need to expand that further. And I don't know if there's anyone on record who has ever said that they actually pay for CloudKit, because the limits are quite large. As you get more users, you get more capacity. So as long as you're really not overdoing it for one single user, you should be fine. So I hope that it does something similar. So as long as you're not submitting a new build to run every 10 minutes, and completely saturating their servers on 100 devices at once, then I think you should be good.
Wait, you're saying they charge by the minute how long it takes the app to run?
Yeah, so GitHub does that, where when you run your testing on a pull request, for instance, it will take up to however many minutes it needs to compile and run all the tests.
You mean if you download the file and then run it?
Yeah, so as if you were to download the file and then run it in Xcode and see how long it takes from start to finish. GitHub Actions works the same way, where when you submit a pull request, for instance, you can configure it to go ahead and on its own download and run and test the project. And if it takes 5 minutes, for instance, you have 2,000 for the month, and it will take up 5 minutes of that. So if someone submits to a pull request 20 times a day, then you're going to eat through those 2,000 minutes very quickly. But if you submit a pull request once every a day, then you're probably not really going to hit that limit, unless you have something that kind of spun out of control and just sat in an infinite loop and ate up 60 hours of time. Then it shouldn't be too much of an issue. As I said before, I think it will be integrated with Bitbucket and stuff like that, because Xcode does have credentials for all that. And I don't see them kind of just supporting one service at this point if they do have credentials for all sorts of them. So it's probably just a question of who has APIs for it and not. So whoever does, then they can go ahead and integrate directly with that. So I think that is going to be fun to play with. I applied on my own developer account to kind of hope to get that early access, just to play around with it once or twice. I don't think I actually have a big use for Xcode to compile stuff for me in the cloud, but it will be good to use for bigger projects.
Oh, sorry, now I'm drawing a blank.
To fill in Spencer's blank, we also have Playgrounds, Swift Playground support on the iPad.
Well,
which is another facet of Xcode that is not called Xcode, but is growing up significantly. So now on the iPad, you can make a full app and submit it to the App Store, which is amazing.
One thing about that, I can't remember what I was going to say, but I actually used Swift Playgrounds a a fair amount. Like when Swift UI came out and it was available on the Swift Playgrounds app. However, the code completion is terrible because it was just a little strip at the bottom, and you'd have to physically tap it or move your cursor to there. So having just even the code completion little pop up that is right where you're typing, that alone is going to make me, use my iPad on the couch and just mess around with Swift UI a ton more. So I'm really excited about that. We were talking and I, kind of remarked that it's kind of a bummer that it really will only support Swift UI itself, as far as I can tell. There's no straight UI kit that you could put in those Swift UI apps. I wouldn't necessarily submit anything.
There's no storyboard. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily submit anything to the App Store, but it is cool that they have this new format, or I think they said it's new, where you can, write whatever you want on your iPad, export it, and then throw it into Xcode, and you can just pick up from there. So that's cool. I think I'd use it more just with that one thing of better code completion.
I really hope that new format is based on Swift packages, because that means that it will be an extensible format going forward. And it's not just another version of the Xcode project file, which is gnarly to say the least. So if it is just a simplified thing like Swift packages, just a folder of source files basically, and it will compile it all, and you put your resources in a different folder, and you're kind of good to go. I think that will be the perfect balance to strike in terms of a new project folder, a project format going forward. Lynn, you also used Swift packages very early on. So
I did.
Not Swift packages, Swift Playgrounds.
Oh, okay.
And you experienced the pain of trying to build something more complex, right?
Are you talking about the ASL thing? Yeah. This was back in 2019 when I was applying for the WWDC scholarship, and they required a Swift UI, or not Swift UI, a Swift Playground project, and of course at that time there was no Swift UI, so everything was done programmatically with like UI kit, and of course I learned storyboards, so it was not very intuitive, and I had a difficult time with that. And in order to create like files, it wasn't like there was no place for you to really create new files. So I think you had to do it on the computer and then drag it in somehow onto the iPad, and then you open it from there, and then you work on it. So it was limited.
They've definitely come a long way. It's really cool to see that. Going back to Xcode 13, what are your thoughts on getting rid of the file extensions and just having those icons for all of the different file types? Have you seen that?
I looked at that jumble of color, and it was really pretty when it's not a project that I'm actually looking at. And then when I opened one of my projects, I'm like, where is everything? I don't know where I am. What is what? Are these folders, I guess? I was very lost.
Yeah.
I'm going to be...
I think it'll...
I'm going to be straight.
I think it's going to take a little getting used to, for sure.
Like...
What is it? Everything's color-coded?
No, kind of. So, like, Swift files are one color, Objective-C.m files are another, .h's are a third, folders are another. But
Images,
it doesn't look...
everything.
Yeah, everything just blends into each other. And I don't know if that's just because I'm, like, dyslexic out the wazoo. Or if, like, this is an actual design problem that Apple has. So I guess time will tell, as with most things. I'm not a fan of Big Sur's removal of texture from icons. I think that is like a huge step in the wrong direction in terms of making things easier to see. And I highly suspect this is going to be a very similar case of that, especially when you have a bunch of things that are all different, all next to each other, that you need to quickly spot, especially if you remember like spatially where they are, then maybe that just becomes useless and you need to just search for everything from now on. That might be a thing.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting. I don't know. Lots of visual changes with macOS Monterey and everything, but yeah, even within Xcode itself, kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's going to the keynote, I felt like a lot of it was fluff. The whole privacy part, the whole health part took a lot of time. And I was really hoping... It very much seemed like the Mac section kind of got forgotten at the end there. It was pushed to the very end. Maybe they didn't want it to get drowned out by the wonderful privacy and health improvements that they've been working on. But it definitely felt like they were padding time because they did not have something ready. And I don't know how much of that is related to like new Macs that we were all basically expecting or very much hoping for. But none of that really came. And it might be because of the chip shortage. It might be because it wasn't ready, or it might be because they are waiting till next year to kind of finish the transition. Who knows? But yeah, I felt a little bit disappointed by that. And it made the keynote kind of underwhelming for me. Like, sure, there weren't any stupid game demos, which they tend to like adding in for bathroom breaks. But like those whole sections felt like that to me.
I was surprised that it went 2 hours long. I mean, last WWDC was nice, short and sweet, especially with sessions. But yeah, I think even the keynote was like an hour and a half, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. I can't remember, but they didn't, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like there didn't need to be as much fluff as there was. And, you know, we didn't even get to anything really developer facing until an hour and 40 minutes in or so. An hour and 30 minutes in.
Yeah, I think they mentioned like, oh, Swift Playgrounds can build apps now. And that was like the first developer-facing thing they even mentioned in the keynote. It just felt
very much like another Apple event to me. Mm-hmm. You know, so.
Without much to announce. Like,
that's
on
true.
Top of it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most exciting things, like, kind of being facetious here, but was new HomeKit improvements and their new home standard, which is cool, but there wasn't a lot there. So interesting to kind of see that.
Yeah. And like, I don't even think tvOS was really mentioned for the most part.
No.
It was there in name on a slide, but not really verbally announced as far as I remember. So that makes a few years in a row that tvOS is kind of left by the wayside. Maybe there's not much to do. Maybe they're not inspired. But it's clear that some teams at Apple are doing a whole bunch of new exploratory work, like in the Reality Kit, and one of the Reality Kit talks that we watched, they were showing how you can just take 100 or so images of an object, pump it into a command line tool on the Mac, and you'll get a 3D object out of that. And that is like magic. You don't have to name things in any particular way. You just have to take a lot of pictures of all kind of directions and sizes, and it will take care of the rest. And that is just magic from like a normal person's point of view. And it's really cool to see Apple doing that. But when they also don't add anything to tvOS, it really shows that, okay, they're kind of done with that platform. They don't really have much to add there. And it's kind of disappointing because I personally think tvOS is a cool thing. And the fact that there isn't anything really cool on it, I don't think is down to the developers that Apple doesn't think uses their platform all that much. It's interesting to see what is being done and what is not being done.
Yeah. I mean, look, they just gave you a new remote. That's enough to hold you off for like 5 more years, right?
Which I keep
just
losing,
leave them
by the
be.
way.
Oh no, I'm in love with mine. It's not the best remote in the world, but it's so much better than the I don't know, little puck that you had before. So it's good.
On the topic of remotes, the back button on the developer app on the Apple TV does not always exit the video, and I don't know what's up with that. Apple, I think you should take a look at your developer app. You might need some new APIs to better support it or something.
Just so today is Tuesday in the week of
Mm-hmm.
WWDC. So we have a ton of new talks to go, and I'm really excited to see them. I went through last night just bookmarking all of the ones that I wanted to do to watch, and it ends up being at least 10 a day. I mean, for as much as we've said, there wasn't a ton there. There are, like Dimitri said, these nice sort of refinements and polishes to the things that we do already have, like a bunch of things with Swift UI, concurrency, just new things with Swift. But even like I've got a couple in here that are, let's see, well, talking about Xcode Cloud, some Catalyst stuff, accessibility, demystifying Swift UI. I'm sure that'll be cool going into how it actually works behind the hood. I'm kind of thinking, if anyone's read kind of one of the first chapters of Obfuscity.io's Swift UI book, they kind of go into that. So I'm wondering if that'll be more of a first party look into how Swift UI works behind the scenes and kind of helping us reason about how to make our Swift UI code better and more efficient. Intelligence. I thought the intelligence was actually a really cool part of iOS and iPadOS 15, is they're really kind of leveraging that a lot, where we've got all of these machine learning, I don't know if you call them cores, or are they separate from the GPU? I can't remember.
Yeah, the neural cores are separate.
Okay. So these neural cores that, are doing every year that they announce a new edition of that, it's just like, it's trillions of operations, and it's just, incredible. But it's also incredible to see them leveraging that and not using it more of like a marketing thing, but actually saying, hey, we're going to suggest apps that should be in focus and everything. So that's really cool. So like I said, just a lot of things to be excited about that aren't necessarily brand new, but just improvements to what we already have.
Yeah, it's clear that there's, as we've been kept on saying, lots of refinements, and that's clearly that's the umbrella that Apple is using this year. So it very much is a Snow Leopard year or iOS 12 year. Was 12 the one that was full of refinements, or was that 13?
I can't remember. We've said this multiple times.
But it definitely is another refinement year. And I don't know if that's a side effect of everyone working from home for a year, or if it's a side effect of Apple kind of feeling the pains that have grown up for quite a while. I remember seeing I remember seeing someone make an analogy to what technical debt is. And the analogy that they used was, it's like a restaurant. If you don't clean your restaurant, eventually you're not going to be able to serve edible food out of it anymore. And the same goes with development. If you don't really clean up what you've been building at a super fast pace, you're going to end up with a mess that you can't really build on anymore. So I think this is the year that Apple kind of doubled down on that. And as a result, we got a few features out of it. But that was as a result of them cleaning up, and not a result of them like putting a whole bunch of new time into new features. I'm sure a ton of features like the object model creation probably took years to kind of put together. And like you said, they use the neural cores to really like do all the work. And somewhat interestingly, that's only available on the Mac. It's not even available on iOS to go ahead and do that work. So I imagine it takes hours just based on that requirement. So it's probably not trivial by any means, but it certainly does feel like magic at the end of the day.
Just on the note of all of this reality kit stuff, I've seen a couple examples of people messing around with it on Twitter, and the results are amazing. How detailed these 3D models are just coming from your phone. It's incredible. So super excited about that. I mean, when they were talking about just making those, I can't remember exactly what the format was, but they mentioned 2 different file formats, and one of them is a format that you can use to 3D print objects. And I was like, how cool would that be if you just, I mean, I don't
scan
really
something
know
and then print
how
it.
many. Yeah, if you have something physically there, I'm not sure you'd want to print it again, but you could. That's super cool. So, you know, lots of cool stuff going on, even if they're not groundbreaking and new.
Yeah, I remember someone did a full body scan of themselves to help with their stitch work and stuff like that. So actually making clothing and cosplay and stuff like that. And they used a model of themselves that they then 3D printed to work on. So it's like a perfect replica of their proportions. So I'm wondering if anyone's going to pull out their camera and scan another person and then throw it into this object creation thing and then get a USDZ model they can just quick look on top of their desk or something. I don't know what you'd want to do with it. But I think the fact that you can even ponder such ridiculous things, I think is perfect. It's wonderful.
Exactly.
So this week's episode is brought to you by StickyWidgets. StickyWidgets is the absolute easiest way to put a sticky note on your home screen and edit it quickly. It's so easy, you never need to open the app itself. Add a sticky widget to your home screen through the iOS home screen editor and tap on it to edit. That's about it. Of course, there's tons of customization options as well. Font color, text size, alignment, all conveniently located in the system's edit widget interface. Add as many sticky widgets as you like, or put them in a smart stack. Sticky widgets are digital sticky notes for your phone. Use them however you'd like. And if you are looking forward to iOS 15 when it comes out in the fall, sticky widgets would work on your iPad as well. So that's one thing that we didn't mention, but widgets and stuff are coming to the iPad. The iPad is growing up a little bit, so lots of fun things to look forward to there. So Sticky Widgets is a free download on the App Store, and additional font and color options are available for a one-time in-app purchase. Thank you so much to Sticky Widgets for sponsoring Code Completion. Check out Sticky Widgets on the iOS App Store today. So with all that out of the way, it's time for Compiler Error, my favorite segment where I get to torture everyone. So let's go over to that.
I finally get to be a part of this. I always watch you guys struggle so much.
Yep. Welcome to the suffering.
So we have 4 statements for you all today, and they are all based on WWDCs of the past. So let's go to statement number 1. Marking the start of the jacket trend that would be used for several years, WWDC 10 gave each attendee a black track jacket with the number 10 stitched on the back. Statement number 2, WWDC 12 was the last event hosted by Steve Jobs, but did see the introduction of the final generation of AirPod Extremes and time capsules, which would no longer be updated. Statement number 3, WWDC 13 sold out in a tremendously fast 71 seconds, but some attendees would later say attendance was worth it since it featured Phil Schiller's can't innovate anymore my ass quote. And statement number 4, WWDC 16 marked the first departure from holding the keynote at the Moscone Center in years by hosting it at the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium instead. So, Lynn, since you are our special guest for today, you gotta go first.
For number 1, I know what it looks like because it's in our closet, but the word stitch, like, are you talking about like needle, like thread stitching, or like printed on, sort of like a adhesive printed on? Or there's no distinction to you?
And there's no distinction to me. I wouldn't pick that as the part that I would.
Okay, so then one is true. One is true. As for the others, I don't know because I didn't really start following, or I didn't meet you until which dub did I meet you? See the introduction of the final generation. I know they stopped supporting airports, and you kept complaining about that. So maybe 2 is also true. I'm just gonna pick. I'll go with 3 since I'm not really sure on any of those.
An excellent choice. Spencer?
Okay. Well, since Lynn cleared up number 1 for me, that was one that I had no idea about, so thank you for that. I do have a couple actually, no, I have Airport Expresses. So I don't know about Airport Extreme. It seems like it was around then that the time capsules and airport extremes were discontinued. So I think that's true. I can't exactly remember what the Phil Schiller's quote was about, but I'm assuming it's the trash can. So that was the last time that was updated, was in 2013. And the only thing with 16 is I'm wondering if it was later hosted at the San Jose McHenry Center or whatever it's called. So I'm going to go with number 4, but not super sure about this one, but we'll go with 4.
Excellent choice as well. So let's start with number 1, since you both agree with that. So marking the start of the jacket trend that would be used for several years, WWDC 10 gave each attendee a black track jacket with the number 10 stitched on the back. And that one is absolutely true, because almost every year since then, they've had a jacket. And most of those had the numbers on them. So we had 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
And I lost your 11.
Oh,
he let me borrow it, and I sort of like hung it on my backpack, and it kind of just fell, and I didn't realize. And then later on, I realized that jacket was important. But we're still...
Just like, this jacket just had a 11 on it. What's so important about this jacket?
I really didn't know. And
it's not like there's only 5,000 in the world.
Oh,
so
no.
we're still together, so I guess it wasn't that important, right?
Yeah, honestly, I find the jackets tacky, so I never wear them.
Yeah, I never wear mine either.
Yeah, so that one is true. So good job to both of you. Statement number 2. So WWDC was the last event hosted by Steve Jobs, but did see the introduction of the final generation of AirPod Extremes and time capsules, which would no longer be updated. So both of you also believe this to be true. And what version of Wi-Fi came with the most recent version of AirPort Extremes?
I think the last Airport Extreme had AC, right?
Mm-hmm. So did AC exist in 2012?
Probably not.
So I don't know the answer to that question, because this one is still false anyways. And the Airport Extremes and time capsules were last updated in 2013, along with the Mac Pro and stuff like that. So that was the first thing that's wrong with this. And the second thing that's wrong with it is that Steve Jobs last hosted the event in 2011, not 2012. So this one is, unfortunately, for both of you, the compiler error, which is...
Got us twice.
Misaligned, so let me correct that. No, still misaligned. There you go. Much better. That one's the compiler error. Steve Jobs last hosted the event in 2011, which I believe was the iPhone 4 event. Might have been the 4S. Don't remember. But moving on to number 3. So WWDC 13 did sell out in a tremendously fast 71 seconds. I remember miraculously waking up at 5 a.m. For this one, only for the checkout page to 500 on me, and I not getting a ticket. So that was the start of my shenanigans of trying to get tickets for Dub. I somehow managed to get a ticket every time since then, except like twice. But yeah, fun stuff. It's the year before the lottery started. Good times. Sorry, Lynn. And it is also, like you said, Spencer, the year that the Mac Pro came out. And Phil Schiller proclaimed on stage, "Can't innovate anymore, my ass," even though they stopped innovating immediately after that for a few years, as they tend to do. The current Mac Pro is in that current slump, it feels like. Where are the MPX modules, Apple? You could be updating them right about now, Apple. No, I'm just kidding. There's a huge chip shortage, Apple.
And boba shortage.
Oh, and a boba shortage, so they can't even...
Oh, no.
They can't even have boba with their chips. Which leads us to statement number 4. WWDC 16 was absolutely the first departure from the Moscone Center in years, but the rest of the conference was still in Moscone West. The keynote and the bash, however, were at the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium, which is a few blocks away, right next to, I think it's the Capitol building, the city. What's
Town hall?
Yeah, the town hall for the city, whatever. The big building in San Francisco that looks important.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So that place. That's where they had the keynote for that year for some reason. I think because they had more people than ever. And Moscone just wasn't large enough to have that many people in a single room. Even though they generally had overflow rooms. Anyways, it wasn't big enough, so they went over to this fancy auditorium. We all got fancy seats, which was like a 2-level kind of thing. That was fun. But the following year they went back to San Jose, I should say, since it used to be in San Jose in the 90s, I think. I don't know. I was too young back then. So
you were just born.
Yeah. Too young. So good job to neither of you. Sorry. Better luck next time. So as always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Code Completion to know when episodes get released. And feel free to tweet at us if there is any topic you'd like for us to get into. Thank you so much, Lynn, for joining in for this Dub special spectacular.
Thanks for having me. Sorry I wasn't able to contribute, but I did learn a lot from your conversation, so yay.
Yeah, I remember you distinctly enjoyed us having the live show because you'd like to listen at the same time, and then we stopped that. So sorry. Yeah. So I guess this way you get to listen in and know what we're talking about. So where can people find you on Twitter?
I'm on Twitter at Lynn Buñol.
So that's LINHBOUNIOL.
Yeah.
And do you happen to host any other podcasts that people might be interested in?
Oh yeah, Dimitri and I are in another podcast called Explain It Slowly, where I ask Dimitri tons of technical questions and he'll answer. Yeah.
Hopefully correctly.
It's awesome. Go listen to it.
Be sure to catch the episode from, I think, a few episodes back, where Spencer was a guest on that show as well.
And got absolutely destroyed.
By the question of Lynn's evilness. So once again, I want to give my thanks to you, Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis. That's SpencerCurtis on Twitter. And my name is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buñol. That's DIMITRIBOUNIOL on Twitter. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.